Perception plays a huge role in pain. If you're not expecting something to be painful, you're not going to really react to it. But if you're expecting something to be painful, it feels really painful. We looked at the behaviors to see, okay, do mice feel pain relief? Now, the question that people ask is like, how can you even tell? Because mice can't talk, right? The beauty of science is that you learn through mistakes, you fumble, and that's also, a good aspect of life.
I don't know about you, but I've always been a bit squeamish of needles. Whenever I get a shot, and I get a lot of them because I go in for a monthly allergy shot, I look away. I don't look at the needle because I feel like it'll hurt worse if I look at the needle. You're listening to the FaceTime with Scientists podcast, and today I'm talking to Malaika Mahmood. She's a pain researcher. I'm really excited for y'all to learn about how pain is not just a physical response, but also an emotional one. Let's go. Well, today we're in the lab with Malaika Mahmood, and you are a pain researcher. You study pain, which I'm super excited to chat with you today about pain and the neuroscience of it. But can you tell us a little bit about what's behind you? Like, where are you today? Yeah, and a little bit about your research.
Yeah, so I am in the lab. I'm a graduate student at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm doing my PhD in neuroscience, and I just finished my second year, going on to my third year. And what is currently behind me is our lovely rig. I can actually take you in closer so you can see kind of the stuff that is inside. So, this is basically like a soundproof booth. We put our mice in here, they'll get head barred, and there's a bunch of different tasks that are set up in here, but the task that I run, or the paradigm that I run, is a tone pain conditioning paradigm. What is happening in here is we have a laser head, and I give laser to mice because I'm interested in looking at their pain responses. And if we look really close right here, this is a speaker where the sound comes out of. And then because mice will elicit USVs, that's the way that they'll communicate. So that is ultrasonic vocalization. I also have a mic set up to try and catch any sounds that they make and see if it is in correlation with pain or the anticipation of pain. We also have our camera set up. So this is a red light, and then we have a camera, and I actually have a filter for the red light, specifically for this laser because it is an infrared laser. The reason why I'm using infrared is because mice can't see in that specific wavelength, which is good. I don't want them to be able to see when the laser is coming on because that affects then how I'm really interested in like the sound association, so I don't want another stimulus kind of muddling with that. So I have a filter to block that laser, so when I go in to score the videos, I'm not biased, and so I can, unbiasedly try and score these mice. So that's the setup right here.
Oh, that's super interesting. Okay, yeah. So to back up a little bit, I mean, you're using mice. What is that like in terms of like eliciting the pain? And then what are you specifically looking for?
The brain area that I'm interested in, which is the secondary motor cortex. So, this area is involved in movement and the anticipation of movement. And so, I want to see if I condition mice to associate a tone with a specific noxious stimulus or a painful stimulus like a laser, if there's any expectation or anticipation of coding that's happening in the neural side of things. And then at the behavioral side of things, I'm really interested to see, like, is there anticipatory like behavior? Like, for instance, for humans, like kids, when they get a shot and they see that the needle is
Right.
sticking, they have like anticipatory behavior where they're like, oh my God, I don't want to get this. Kind of curious to see, if I can quantify that in mice, and then if that's relating to anything in the secondary motor cortex.
That's super interesting. Okay, yeah. So I listened to a couple of your videos, and you're a great science communicator. You also have a TED Talk out there about science and religion, which we'll talk about too. Can you explain a little bit about like what is pain in terms of it has this like dual function of like, we feel hurt, but there's also this
Yeah.
very much like kind of neuroscience or even like emotional part of it?
Yeah, so pain is super complicated because when we talk about pain, we're also talking about the emotional side of pain and this like cognitive side of pain, meaning like how do we make predictions, right? Like if we see something hot, we're going to be like, okay, I'm not going to go near that, right? And sometimes you learn that, hey, if I touch something, this is going to hurt. And so there's a whole learning component that's part of it. And then perception plays a huge role in pain. So there's really interesting, like we see it in day to day life. For instance, if you're not expecting something to be painful, you're not going to really react to it. But if you're expecting something to be painful, it feels really painful. Like
Uh,
like shots feel really painful to them because they're expecting, oh my God, I'm getting a really sharp needle. Whereas when you become an adult, you're just like, it's just a pinch. Um, so there is this whole like, which makes it really hard to study because you can't control for these natural factors that happen. So one of the reasons why I use, infrared light is I don't want mice to see there's a light stimulus coming and I don't want them to associate seeing something with feeling something. I want to see if they hear something, if they can from that just playing that tone alone, if they can expect to get pain, and if so, can I see them wince, cuz mice can wince. Mice have grimacing that they do just like humans. uh,
wow.
and so I'm interested in seeing all of that and like any like anticipatory movement maybe ahead of time, because the thing that I look as my main measure of pain I'm looking at is face wiping. So because I'm aiming at the whisker pad of the mice, what they'll do is they'll go and they'll like wipe their whisker. And so I want to see maybe they have anticipatory movement where they're like, oh, I hear the tone. Oh, am I about to get a laser? And maybe they go ahead to prep, but then they're like, oh, I don't feel anything. So maybe that was just a false alarm. But they think they're going to get it.
Wow. Okay, that's super cool. I didn't, yeah, I was gonna ask, like, obviously as humans, we realize that there's this emotional side of pain. You know, I don't know. As I grew up as being an athlete, right? And there's
Uh,
this, very much a philosophy there of kind of like no pain, no gain, like, push through pain. And I don't know, think of that as maybe a very human thing, but that animals also have this, very emotional side of pain is maybe something that I don't know that I realized. Um, yeah, what is your interest in studying that and studying this anticipatory side maybe of pain for mice? Like what are the implications for that if you do find that they have this anticipatory part of it?
Yeah, so there's actually really interesting clinical work when we look at humans who are in chronic pain. So, for instance, like let's say you get a back injury, right? And you can't bend a specific way. So now your brain is anticipating pain because when we look at pain, pain is really just a cost benefit decision making system. It's weighing out all your options and seeing what is the most effective and beneficial way to protect the body. And so, if you're injured in your back and let's say you can't bend a specific way, you start associating that, okay, if I bend this way, I'm going to keep feeling pain. So, what happens is oftentimes when patients will recover from a back injury, the tissue has healed. They still have these quote unquote like maladaptive behaviors where if they bend, they're still feeling pain for some reason, even though that injury isn't there. And so there's actually different types of therapies that are out there, such as pain reprocessing therapy. And what that does is it helps patients recontextualize their movements. So they tell them that, like, it's okay to bend, you're not going to feel pain. And so it's like retraining the brain because it's been rewired from, having pain to anticipate it to try and like rewire it back again to not anticipate that type of pain. And it's interesting because it's used as a therapy, but we don't understand like where this plasticity is happening, how is it happening, at what time and place does it take place during the time point of when a person gets pain. And so kind of seeing that, it really prompted this my thesis to try and see if we can figure out like what is going on in the brain. And then the other interesting thing too is, being in the pain field, a lot of people view motor reflexes as just like, or motor changes as reflexes. But there's work showing that when pain causes changes in motor output, that in and of itself, the changes in motor output is changing the brain. And we don't know what's going on there, why that is. And so that's another reason for why, I want to go into this really niche area and see if we can figure out, what is happening to the brain when there's acute pain. And if we can figure that out, maybe it can help inform, better ways to utilize these therapeutics and also help patients who are trying to recover and create like better outcomes and alternatives.
I know that I do this really weird thing where, like, if something's hurting, I'll, like, keep moving it and that, like, check if it's hurting more. Like, I'll be like, "Oh, is my elbow still hurting? Yeah, it's still hurting," and I'll just, like, keep moving it to kinda check because like, I want it to recover quickly because of, like, I can't go work out until it's recovered, so it's like I almost keep testing what
Yeah.
hurts. Is that not normal?
To be honest, I don't know. I think that's a good thing. I think you should be moving your body because in the pain field, like when you look at a lot of like spinal cord injury research and you look at, people who are even paralyzed, there's a really cool study that had shown that with paralyzed patients, if they are paralyzed from the waist down, what they do is they do assisted movement. And so they'll help the patient move their legs. And then eventually, little by little, they'll get them to move it. And then because they're paralyzed, you would expect like everything is severed, so they can't move it. But there's really, this paper that I'm talking about was able to get paralyzed patients to move their body.
Wow.
So it's all about like, what is that saying? It's like use it or lose it, right?
Right.
So I think it's great that you're doing that. I mean, has it helped when you've been?
Depending, sometimes it's like a something that where it's not just painful just sitting there, right? It's like I have a little bit of a muscle strain and it's like I'm kind of anxious about it healing. So it's like I'm kind of constantly like, oh, maybe it's feeling better now. No, it's not feeling better. So I think it's that like movement, like, it's not so much pain. So maybe kind of related to that. It's like at what point and is it different for everyone? It's like at what point it's like the pain is so much that you're like, "No, I'm totally avoiding this," versus like that like it's like stretching, like, feels kinda hurting, but kinda good, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, your perception is playing a huge role in that, which makes it even harder. And then if we want to make this even more complicated, genetics. So there's like this whole area where people are trying to understand genetic side of it and like why is it that people feel pain differently. If we both get poked, maybe I rate it higher than you would rate it higher, but why is that? Is it based on our experiences, our perception, how we feel even in that moment? Like maybe I feel really bad in that moment and maybe you're like, oh, I'm gonna have such a great day, like I'm looking forward to doing something, and you're like, this doesn't really bother me.
Right.
It's just like a lot of like tangled parts, which makes it really fun to do research in because, as you know, the more ways you try to answer something, you just end up getting more questions, which is great.
Yeah.
Then you start
I
going
love that.
down these rabbit holes.
I love that about science.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you did publish a study recently, or you worked with collaborators who published a study that's really interesting, looking at um, an opioid like mimic
Yeah.
that targets specific neurons that you've identified or helped identify in the brain that are related to that like affective or emotional part of pain. Just from my like reading the abstract, it seems like you were able to block this kind of like emotional side of pain by identifying specific neurons related to that without these other maybe side effects that opioids have, that related to like respiration or, other things that are dangerous about opioids. Can you talk about that a little bit and like how, yeah, that we have different neurons in the brain that maybe process different aspects of pain?
Yeah, so that paper that got published was actually work from Dr. Greg Corder's lab, and we were really interested in understanding the anterior cingulate cortex, which is an area of the brain. It's a very frontal area of the brain, And there's a lot of people who are working in this area and have found that it's involved in this emotional aspect of pain and how we feel about pain. So oftentimes when we get pain, it's an unpleasant experience. We feel bad about it. We're like, I don't feel well, like this is making me sad. So that area seems to be heavily involved in that. Now, what's interesting is opioids also seem to be hitting, this area of the brain. The thing about opioids is they're actually hitting a lot of targets. It's a pretty messy drug, which is why you'll see various types of side effects like respiratory issues. And there is this aspect where when someone takes an opioid, they have like a euphoric type of experience while they're on it. They feel good.
Right.
And so it's hitting certain areas of the brain that are involved in that. But then the thing is, as soon as opioids leave the system, you go through severe withdrawal symptoms. And the other dangerous thing about opioids is you end up building tolerance. And so it's not a good medication for a lot of patients because they'll end up getting addicted on it, and then they need higher and higher doses. And then it's just affecting all different types of person's body. So, what we found is in the anterior cingulate cortex, which is really cool, we found neurons that are responsive to not only pain, but also have these opioid receptors, which are receptors in which opioids will go and bind to and cause, people to feel like they're getting pain relief. And so we were interested to see, okay, can we mimic this without actually giving an opiate? So we used mice and we targeted using a really cool viral strategy, specifically only neurons in the anterior cingulate cortex that are responsive to pain and that have these opioid receptors. And we used a really cool approach using chemogenetics. And then we looked at the behaviors to see, okay, do mice feel pain relief? Now, the question that people ask is like, how can you even tell? Because mice can't talk, right? So, but infer through their behaviors. So we looked at, traditional type of pain behaviors. So we used something like Von Frey, which Von Frey is you poke the mice and you see how responsive they are to the poke. We've put mice on a hot plate. So we want to see like how long does it take mice on a plate that's hot to withdraw their paw or remove their paw. We then looked at open field as well. So we put mice in just, an open arena and saw how their movement was. And then we also injected capsaicin. I actually did this. I had injected capsaicin into the hindpaw of mice. So capsaicin is, the thing that makes spicy things be spicy. And so you put it into the hindpaw of their mice to see, okay, normally when mice get it, they're like furiously licking and they're trying to like get rid of that. But when we chemogenetically manipulated the anterior cingulate cortex, we were able to mimic opioid analgesia. So mice had latency to respond, meaning they weren't responding as fast when they were on a hot plate when they normally do. They weren't like so much licking the hindpaw when I gave them capsaicin. I also did a formalin injection, which formalin's very toxic. That is very painful experience for them, and they obviously will react to it, but they don't react to it the same way they were before we tried to mimic this opioid analgesia. There's a lot of cool things we did in that paper, but this was some of the things that I got to help with, and it was really cool to see that like we can manipulate these receptors without using opioids. And the other thing too is we naturally have opioids in our system. So we have things like endorphins, which is the thing that makes us
Right.
feel good. And sometimes what happens is another like translationally related thing is, if someone gets into a crazy like accident, like a car accident, they may not initially feel the pain because there's a shot of adrenaline going through their system. And that's like a natural system to protect the person until they are safe. And then when they're safe, they're like, oh my God, this is terrible. Like my leg is like, injured, etc. So it's cool to see that maybe we could find a way to use our own natural opioid system to try and help people who are in pain.
That's super interesting. Yeah, related to that, when I saw a video where you were mentioning this aspect of in a in not high stress, but yeah, like you said, a car accident or something, you don't feel that pain. I definitely have an experience with this. Like, I am also a performer, like a, dancer, aerial silks artist. But when I'm on stage in particular, like in front of an audience doing that, I often find after a performance like that, like I'm going all out. I'm like super having, a lot of endorphins,
Yeah.
a lot of that kind of like euphoria being on stage.
Yeah.
And afterwards I'll be like, oh man, I think I hurt my arm like when I was up there, but I didn't notice in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's so interesting. It's like, why does that happen? Like, how is it that we feel pain and differently in different situations like that?
Yeah, it's like the show must go on. Maybe that's what the body's thinking
Yes,
until
exactly.
until the curtains call, and then after that, you're
Exactly.
like, "All right, now I'm safe. Okay, okay, what's going on with my body?"
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, related to this, there are some people who are finding it kind of disconnected from their bodies, right? And using like meditation or practices where you kind of tune into your body and get curious, right? And like feel things. Yeah, like is there research on that or are you curious about that in terms of like how um yeah, how like kind of intuition, that
Yeah.
like mind body connection can help treat pain or, help people deal with pain or just help people maybe people there's some people who don't feel pain and that's a problem. Then they
Yeah.
need
Yeah, so that's actually a disorder. So people who can't feel pain, I believe it's called congenital insensitivity to pain disorder. And so it's a genetic disorder, and unfortunately, these people die at a very young age because they don't realize they have internal injuries, and so they'll die from that. Actually, on like related to this, there's a really cool Grey's Anatomy episode on this. There's a girl, and she comes in to the clinic because I forget why she comes in. I think they like found something with her, and she's like, "No, like punch me, like I can take it." They realize she has congenital insensitivity to pain disorder. So what
wow.
happens oftentimes is these people will get injured and they won't feel the pain. And so because of that, then they don't know that it needs to get treated, and over time it gets worse. Like they'll have like a broken ankle and not know it, and they feel fine. But over time, that accumulates, and if you don't treat an injury, it can end up becoming very severe. So what's interesting is we were talking a little bit about like expectation and how we feel and the emotional side of things and meditation. So there is cool clinical work that is trying to look at that, but something I wanted to mention is the placebo effect. So, the placebo effect is really cool, and there's not a lot of people that are studying it because it's kind of hard to study in animal models. But actually, placebo is really interesting because you can give a patient a sugar pill, for instance. It does nothing to the body. There's no actual medication in it, but if a doctor gives it and is like, hey, this will help you with your pain, and the patient believes it, and then all of a sudden they come back and they're like, oh my God, thank you so much. That felt so good. All perception, which is crazy, which is
Is
great because
this
if we can like biohack this, again, we can use our own internal natural system that we have to maybe try and help patients cope with it. Now, there's the reverse of placebo effect, and that's nocebo effect. And that is if you believe something will cause pain, it will cause you pain. So if someone is thinking, let's say you're walking in the woods. I was listening to a really good podcast, and this was the example that they had given. And he was walking in the woods. You're kind of on high alert. There's snakes nearby, something's going on. He feels something hit his leg. And he goes onto the ground and is like, oh my God, I got bit. I'm going to die. Like, it's actually going through like painful symptoms. Realized this, it was just a stick.
oh my
So the
gosh.
reverse can happen as well, which is really interesting. And there are people also trying to study that and see, how that affects, just our whole experience. Because pain is a whole entity and experience. There's actually philosophers that have also talked about pain. So one famous one is Rumi, who was an Islamic scholar, and he has a really good like quote that he said, and I forget the exact wording of it, but he was like, to understand pain, basically, you need to understand it. like where it is coming from, because that can help us figure out, okay, how can we move forward and heal.
Wow. That's amazing. I have so many questions related to that, but you talk about kind of biohacking, like how can we use our own systems? Like what exactly do you mean by that? And how is that relating to your research in terms of are you looking for specific molecules or specific areas of the brain that you could target? Kind of like what are you looking for in terms of implications to humans?
Yeah, so with biohacking, what I mean is using our own body to try and heal. I'm not specifically focused on biohacking. I'm more interested in understanding just how is pain processed in the brain. We have to start with some like basic question before we can try and get to a translational or treatment side of things. And so I really am interested. So, like I was saying earlier, I'm interested in the secondary motor cortex, which there is a primary motor cortex, which is right after it. And then the secondary motor cortex is like what is known as the premotor area. Now, here's the interesting thing, the secondary motor cortex, there's like a split in the pain field versus the decision making field in terms of what people are attributing it to. So the lab that I'm in, it's a decision-making learning lab, and I'm co-mentored. This lab that I'm currently in is in Michelle Insanali's lab, Dr. Michelle Insanali, and then I'm also co-mentored by Dr. Sarah Ross. And so this is a really cool collaboration project to bridge two fields that haven't really had a chance to maybe talk to each other. So, with the secondary motor cortex, the pain field, from what I understand, it attributes it as an area that's really involved in like the actual movements of the body. Whereas when you look at the decision making and learning field, they attribute this area as a higher order area. It's involved in the decision making. So it is the area that'll light up when an animal is trying to decide, okay, what should I do? Should I run? Should I move? Should I withdraw? And so it's interesting, there's this like difference in views, and that's why I'm really interested in looking at this area. What's also interesting about the secondary motor cortex is it receives connections from all over the brain. So the auditory cortex sends projections to the secondary motor cortex, and the secondary motor cortex sends projections back to the auditory cortex. So Dr. Michelle Insanali actually found that if you inhibit, which is if you block the projections from the secondary motor cortex to the auditory cortex, it causes mice to not flexibly be able to learn a new task, which is
Oh,
really interesting. And then there's work that has shown that, the somatosensory cortex, which is the area that's involved in the identification of pain, the location, the intensity, also projects to the secondary motor cortex. And the secondary motor cortex also is projecting and getting inputs from frontal areas of the brain, like the anterior cingulate cortex. So it's like this hub that's receiving and getting inputs and sending them out to different areas, which is why I'm also interested in looking at this region and seeing, like, how's it involved in pain, how's it involved in the anticipation of pain, what is it doing, why is no one looking at this area, especially because on the human side of things there is transcranial magnetic stimulation. So what that is this is done in patients who have chronic pain and who have not been able to get pain relief from treatments. So what they do is they go into the brain and they magnetically will stimulate the motor cortex. They
wow.
specifically will stimulate the primary motor cortex, which is believed to be the area involved in the actual movements, so like actually moving your leg and your arms. And people seem to get pain relief from that. So there is some connection in these regions with pain. I think the other thing too is oftentimes, people forget that pain is a really strong stimulus. Like, it makes you fully aware when you're in pain. Oh my gosh.
Right.
All areas of your brain are going to try and figure out, like, okay, what do we do to protect the body and to prevent further harm? So,
Yeah, that was really interesting. I definitely have some family members who have chronic pain, and it's just kind of this like I feel like when you combine that with anxiety or with other mental health, struggles, it kind of just like amplifies all of those things because like you said, you just become like aware, like maybe you're less able to deal with a stressful situation, when you're in pain, or, you're less able to deal with, like, other aspects of life, just like being in pain. So it's really interesting, but are you saying, like, not many people study that secondary motor cortex, and, like, why not? Is it just they haven't really known, or there's just maybe uncertainty about what it does?
Yeah, it seems to be there's just uncertainty about what it does. The decision making and learning field isn't really looking at pain, and pain people are really viewing these like motor changes as just reflexes and not as something that is an underlying like cognitive plasticity that's happening in the brain, which is why I'm interested in this area because I'm like, guys, this could be amazing if we can figure out this area is or isn't involved too, because if it's not involved, that's good to know. And if it is involved, that's even better because then we can ask more questions and try and parse this area. But you had mentioned about, how your family members also, having pain leads to anxiety. So there's this whole interesting thing where, you know, pain causes a huge cognitive load, right? It causes unpleasantness and it causes anxiety. If you know you're going to expect pain when it rains, right? You become more anxious of the weather. If a certain context, like, where you had an accident, this happens a lot. Like, there's a PTSD related thing where if, on a specific, intersection you had an accident, you may be more apprehensive of driving or going at that specific intersection. And so pain amplifies, like you said, anxiety, and anxiety amplifies pain. So it's a very vicious cycle. And there's researchers also trying to understand that and maybe kind of break that vicious cyclical thing that's happening in the brain.
What are you most excited about right now in terms of pain research and your own research?
The pain field is a newer field in comparison to the auditory field, the visual field. So there's still a lot of questions to ask and get answered. I see a whole career in this. But I just really am, in terms of like my work, I'm really excited to see, what is the secondary motor cortex doing in pain. The my mice that are going through this paradigm, like, can I see that they can build an expectation of pain? Because we know we can train animals to expect pain in a context, right? That's Pavlovian fear conditioning. We can train
Right.
mice to expect a shock when they get a tone. But how do they learn to make those associations? We forget that like that does require different areas of the brain to talk to each other, and to then retain that information and remember it, which is another big thing. And so I just am interested to see like what areas this research will take me down. And like I said, it's going to lead to more questions than answers, which is great, because then it means there's many different directions we can take it. And then I eventually hope that, my work can help inform therapeutics and also inspire people to take, these different, like, look at pain in different contexts and try to understand, like, what is the brain doing and how can we better understand ourselves as humans and how we deal with just day to day pains.
To me, this is why neuroscience to me has always seemed like a bit of magic. I don't know. Like it always has seemed like an area of science that's quite I don't know, it has this mystery to it. I mean, how did you get into neuroscience as a field, as a study? Did you always know you were going to study that, and then in pain in particular?
Yeah.
I feel like it is a very difficult, I feel like there's studies where you can just kind of like look at neurons under, let's say you're studying a disease of the brain, and you can kind of stay very like focused on the pathology or the like physical aspects of that. But then when you're like also bringing in things like pain, which is a very much of like an experience, or it has sensory input, it has like all these things. I feel like it just gets really complicated. Like I feel like as this neuroscientist, you're having to pull from yeah, from maybe, philosophy, from experience, from like, it's very human side of neuroscience that maybe, I don't know, within a field that is very like hard science as well.
Yeah, my interest in neuroscience, it actually started from a really young age. I was just always interested in behavior, like why do people behave the way they do? Um, And that kind of led me to taking, and I think this is where a lot of people, if you ask them, like, how'd they get interested in neuroscience? AP Psych was like one of the ways people got interested. And so when I learned in high school about like neurons and, the different areas of the brain that are involved in different aspects of our life and different like experiences, I was like, oh my God, like I would be interested in doing that. At that time, I didn't understand that you could do this as a career, like do neuroscience research. I knew I wanted to do research, so what I ended up doing was I was pre-med in undergrad, but I wanted to get research experience. And so I went to Rutgers Camden, phenomenal like university that I went to. It's a small campus, and I reached out to Dr. Nathan Fried, amazing, amazing neuroscientist. Is like the reason why a lot of us got into neuroscience research because he's so passionate about the work that he does and gets students really excited about it. So I visited his lab, shadowed. That is when I learned about optogenetics, which optogenetics is a technique where you can turn neurons on and off by light. And I thought that was the
Oh.
coolest thing ever. I was like, you can do that? Like, how many people can we help with that? That's amazing. And so he was looking at Drosophila, which are fruit flies. And so he was using a chronic pain model and was using optogenetics to see if we turn on a specific group of neurons on and off with light, how does it affect flies feeling pain? And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And so I started taking, we had a really cool program that he actually led. It's a class called Principles and Practices of Biological Research, and it's an experimental class. It's a semester long, it's like a mini thesis where you ask whatever question you want and you get to run with it. And so the group that I was working with, we decided to look at how CBD relieves pain. So at that time, CBD was like everywhere. CBD relieves migraines, CBD
Right,
relieves
right.
pain. We're like, how? Like, what is going on? It's a topical. How is it working? And people will also use like there was CBD inhalation. So we actually had our we had Dr. Freed get a vape pen that had
Oh
CBD,
my gosh.
and we gave it to fruit flies, and we gave them chronic pain by cutting their leg off, which is sad, obviously.
Oh, no.
But then we gave them CBD vapes, so
Oh, good.
and we tried to see, okay, like, is adenosine receptors, which is a receptor that's involved in, it's actually, when I think of adenosine receptors, I think of caffeine because that's what caffeine will
Mm.
bind to cause you to also have, like, high energy, feel good response. And so we were curious, is adenosine receptors doing anything in this? The project, because we were also new at doing science, we were troubleshooting for most of the semester, but it was such a good experience. And I really liked that. I really liked that we could create a novel paradigm to look at this and troubleshoot things and just, figure out if it's working, if it's not working. From there, I decided, okay, I want to do a PhD. And so after that, I applied to a lab. This was, by the way, COVID. This was peak COVID time. So we actually really couldn't come to campus. So we had to do like rotations of like who can come into lab and who can't because there was the social distancing aspect as well. But then after that, I got an opportunity to work with Dr. Victoria Abrera at Rutgers, New Brunswick, which is the main campus. And I got to do spinal cord injury research. And in that, I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do pain because I was like, I'm really interested in the brain. And so I was like interested more in like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And I was like, I don't think I want to do pain. I think this is enough for me. And then I got an opportunity right after I graduated to work as a technician in Dr. Gregory Corder's lab. And that's where I learned, wait, we can study pain in the brain. I didn't know this. And then after that, I was like, oh, I actually want to be in this field. There's so many questions we don't know. And the brain is just so interesting. Like you said, it's like, it's a mystery box. There's so many different experiences. And so I caught the bug and I've been on this dark side, so to say. Decided not to go to medical school and found my true passion of like asking questions and chasing after that.
I love that. And I was gonna ask you kind of what do you wish more people knew about science, but I feel like you answered that to some extent of like what you love about science is like, yeah, like where are the areas where there's so many outstanding questions and just getting curious about that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people like don't understand, especially like the public, where they're especially the current climate, given with everything going on in science. A lot of how we get to therapeutics and treatments is through basic science research. And so we have to understand the basic side of things, and animal models are really important for that because it's currently the best systems that we do have to try and entangle what is going on in the brain. I'm sure humans don't want to get viruses injected into their brains. So, animal work is the best way to do that and to get one step closer into understanding, like, how can we alleviate human suffering and help people? Because pain is the most costliest health burden in the United States. Actually, my mom suffers from chronic pain, and she is a very like mentally strong person. If you see her, you would never know she's suffering from chronic pain, and she actually can't take medications either. She's very sensitive to medications, um, and I don't know how she does it. Like that is where I also believe like she's very spiritual and is close to her religion, and that has really like helped her cope through the pain. And I want to create a world where we can find a cure or at least a really good form of treatment so people don't have to suffer.
Right. I feel like there's very much this kind of like treating pain from kind of a drug side or kind of therapeutic or, molecular level to treating pain through that, like those other neurons or those other inputs that affect, maybe that emotional side.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really cool that you're kind of, studying both aspects of that.
Yeah, pain is a holistic experience. And so I think that the way we need to go about in terms of like treatment and even understanding it is we need to take more of a holistic approach. We were talking about this earlier, like something as simple as just how you feel in the moment can affect whether you're going to amplify that pain or not. And so which is why like I'm just interested in this area is because we can try and find these different threads that are like entangled and see if we can start pulling out like the knots and maybe find something that could be useful for people
Yeah.
who are who are suffering or even just in acute pain too. Like it sucks when you stub your toe. Maybe if you can just change your perspective, maybe it'll feel less painful. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, so do you think and it's related to that study you mentioned earlier, well, that I asked you about that you recently published with looking at, the lab identified specific neurons that are related to that kind of emotional side of pain. I thought it was really interesting, like this idea of like cell-specific pain targeting. So it's like not, going back to opioids, like the fact that they hit many, many different targets, right? I feel like that's always where drugs have side effects, where it's like it does something good, but then has all these other like side effects. Like if we can get more targeted, or even like a very specific neuron or cell type, and specifically give a drug to that, like maybe do you think that that's the future of targeting pain, of like maybe very targeted therapies along with, well, I mean, you talk about meditation or spirituality, it's kind of very much not targeted, but maybe in a way that's not gonna give you like terrible side effects.
Yeah, I think that the way like our research is showing and the way that the field is going towards, we are trying to get more towards personalized treatments of pain because everyone has different genetics, maybe different number of receptors too, even in the brain. And so I think we want to be more intentional in providing the best approach that is targeted and also can cause the least, number of adverse side effects. Like you said, like opioids is super messy. A lot of medications are actually pretty messy. There's no like linear way to just try and target one specific like symptom or one specific aspect of the experience. It unfortunately affects a whole wide variety of things. And so I do see that the future is going more towards personalized treatment, which I think would be great because, again, not everyone feels pain the same way, which means our treatment should also try and, create equability in that standpoint.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, do you have kind of like in spirit of wrapping up, like, a favorite area of the brain, that you're studying as well as, yeah. Yeah.
Well, currently, obviously, the secondary motor cortex is that
Yeah, exactly.
but I think the brain is really cool, and I think because it is a system that's interacting with each other, like all different parts, I just think that the brain itself is very cool. I think it becomes a little bit dangerous when we, put a lot of emphasis on one particular brain region. We're like, this brain region is super important, or this cell type is super important, because the brain
Right.
doesn't work that way. It's not a very like secular area. It's a gradient. Things are doing things at a different time. They're connecting with each other at different times. Neurons that wire together fire together, and that can happen at like any point. And so this probably isn't a good answer, but I just like the entire brain, which is why I'm in this field.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it goes back to that kind of, right, like, holistic view, more so looking into the future, like a holistic view of the brain, the body, the mind-body connection, the, like, how these different things work together, and knowing that from that basic biology side helps us target them better, whether we're trying to holistically treat things or not?
Yeah, yeah. I think that the more open-minded people are, especially researchers are, one of the things we're taught as graduate students is like, don't get tied down to an idea. Things change. That's the beauty about science. Science is built on failures. And so you don't want to have your heart set on something. And then when it fails, you're heartbroken and you're like, well, I don't think this is the career for me. The beauty of science is that you learn through mistakes, you fumble, and that's also a good aspect of life. We are just kind of walking through this life, figuring things out. Rumi actually has a really good quote, which I do remember this one, and he said that when you start finding the way will open up. And so I think that's just a beautiful way of looking at life and science overall.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Do you get people kind of, I don't know, excited that you're working in this field? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, in terms of being able to help them and their family members who maybe deal with chronic pain and or the long-term impacts of, like, treating that pain, like, from opioids.
I think it's really important, one, for patients to advocate for themselves. Doctors do not know everything, and it's really important that you, as a patient, try and stay informed. And if you believe that, a specific treatment is going to work for you, definitely try and advocate for yourself. Read and, try and educate yourself on the literature that is out there, and talk to people, talk to scientists. One book I would really recommend people who are interested in like the opioid epidemic and really trying to understand pain is The Empire of Pain. That book actually made like opened my eyes to the opioid epidemic and how severe it is, and the large role that these pharmaceutical companies have. And I think it brings a really humane aspect to this whole situation that we're in. um, and so, yeah, my biggest piece of advice would be for patients in particular, and their loved ones, is to always advocate for yourself. You know your body. No one else knows it better than you. And so, yeah.
That's awesome. Sweet, well, thank you so much. Is there anything you're gonna do the rest of the day in terms of science? Are you leaving the lab after this?
I actually got to go do data analysis to figure
Alright.
if my experiment worked. But thank you so much for having me and for creating a platform like this. I think this is so cool. FaceTime with the scientists. It's important for people to see that we're also human, and the things that we're doing. There are, people who are really trying to make a good impact in the world. So thank you for creating a platform like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.